Okay, we are back. Welcome back in, folks, or to those of you joining us for the first time, welcome in. I'm Nick, this is Adam. In this sub-series on antifragility, we kind of deep dive into specific scenarios that athletes will commonly face and explore elements of antifragility through those scenarios. This particular segment, we're moving on with kind of the 7 core components of antifragility, which means focusing on psychological flexibility. So what we'll do in this short episode is just quickly review what we mean by psychological flexibility. We're not going to get too much into the science. We did that in the core podcast. If you're interested in nerding out on that, go check it out. We instead are going to focus on just getting to the essence of the term, what that looks like in real life and real practice for athletes or the people trying to support and promote athletes. Okay, so we'll start here. Simple definition. Adam, lay it out for us what you think of as psychological flexibility in basic terms.
So when I think of psychological flexibility, I think about the ability to contact the present moment, one's thoughts and one's feelings, without defense, accepting what is, and then depending on the situation, either persisting in or changing one's behavior in the pursuit of value-based goals.
Real simple language, know your goals, be able to pursue them despite how you feel. Okay, all right. And so we can develop tools, techniques, right? Different ways and abilities to do that. Let's first then sort of contextualize what exactly that means or where that would most likely show up for an athlete, right? And I think that typically what you're going to see is situations that require the essence of psychological flexibility, which are situations that require adaptability, right? Would you agree with that on the surface at least?
Yeah, I think adaptability is probably the most essential factor. It's not only adapting to what's happening internally, but also adapting to the context around us.
So context shifts, right? Moments of transition, moments of adaptability. I think if we were to kind of come up with a short list of some of them, and then we can kind of tackle 1 or 2 of these. And we're going to start reaching out more and more to kind of the growing community around antifragility and requesting topics that maybe you'd like us to cover in these segments. But for now, I listed a couple, Adam. I'm looking at them here. You can probably think of others. I went with sustaining a significant injury, right? I think that's going to be a common one. I think or how you respond or making a huge mistake at a critical moment. Those are just the 2 most immediate that come to mind, but what are some of the situations you most often see that require psychological flexibility?
Yeah, I think what comes up most often, particularly on the field, is dealing with mistakes and dealing with with fears of basically choking under pressurized moments and the thoughts and feelings that come up in these situations, and as opposed to learning to fight with them, which so much of us do, or this idea of being overly positive. There's a sense of acceptance and then establishing these routines or emotional anchors, regardless of how one feels, even if one simultaneously feels stressed or is having doubts. Okay. You can still perform well when you don't feel necessarily good.
So there's, I think, a couple different nuances here that maybe we can dig into, and let's take this exact scenario then, which is just making a mistake, right? Critical moment, non-critical moment, whatever. It's a meaningful mistake, right? The athlete is potentially reeling from that mistake, projecting, maybe worried about future performance, whatever it might be. What we've sort of said so far and kind of put out in the main podcast is there's an acceptance approach, right? There is, and it's not an either or, it's a both and sometimes. There's a potential framing approach, like how do you want to think about these things, and reality check, right? There's different ways to tackle it. So in terms of a how-to, right? One of your big league athletes has made that mistake. You want to get them started on the process of being aware of what happened, what their values are, how they feel about it, right? And then either framing and or accepting in a way that helps them move forward. How do you do that? Where do you get started?
Well, the first is some sense of awareness and checking in with self, okay, regardless of what the situation is, right, to see if we're responding in what I would consider the most effective way to move forward regardless of the situation. So once we get past awareness and recognizing what happened, then it's accepting whatever is. And the idea is not to fight it, but willing to experience those difficult emotions in the moment. For instance, a pitcher walking a batter in a clutch situation. Next, which is an element that's important within these.
Can I pause you there?
Sure.
Well, hold on, Adam. So what would be the difference between a willingness or an unwillingness? Like, what would that look like in real life with someone who's willing to engage in distress tolerance versus pitcher on the mound is like they're on the mound, they can't go anywhere. How can they avoid it? If that question makes sense.
Well, the idea is we're not avoiding any of it. The idea is that you're going to accept what you're feeling at the time, and you're going to accept the outcome. Maybe you didn't execute the pitch as well as you could have or should have.
But how do you do? But that's not my question. I know we shouldn't avoid it, but you implied that some do.
Right.
How does that look different?
It looks different because those that do it well have the ability to it's called cognitive diffusion. So the idea is they have a way to interact with their thoughts and feelings so they're not dominated by anything as being a literal truth. Rather than saying, oh my God, I pitched poorly, I suck, I'm going to blow this situation. They're just thoughts. It's a different relationship with these words and images that aren't necessarily going to dictate the next behavior, the next pitch.
Okay, so use your fishing analogy here, if you would, right? Because so far what you've done is you've established, okay, there's basic awareness, right? There's cognitive diffusion, and there's self as context. We don't need to get into the sciencey language here, but just use your fishing analogy to help people understand what that looks like for an athlete in that moment.
The way I describe it to my athletes is that if you're a trout fisherman and in this beautiful stream, there are going to be all kinds of fish that are floating by and swimming past you, and some fish will be bass and some might be sunfish, and they're neither good or bad. They're just fish that we're not fishing for at this time. We're only looking to capture and to focus on trout. So we just allow the rest of the fish to exist in the water with us, but we don't mind them so much. And our focal point is basically the trout that we're looking to catch for the day. And what that means is there's certain thoughts and feelings that are workable, that are useful, that are going to move us forward. And there's certain thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are going to keep us stuck. And if we could focus on the ones that are going to drive us forward, they're the ones we want to attach to. The rest we let go.
How do we great. How do we know which ones are the ones that are going to drive us forward?
Because
it's what part of what we've established is it's not about the affect. It's not about the feeling good or bad, right? So how do we start to decipher what is not pleasant or unpleasant, but high or low utility?
It's I think utility based upon values, and the idea is it's important for us to identify and connect what's truly important and meaningful in life, but also important and meaningful for the situation, what's task relevant. Because ultimately that's going to guide and value and motivate our actions, and it's going to provide direction and purpose for us to focus our attention.
Okay, so basics, right? You're increasing your awareness of thought, right? Some of the as you put it, different types of fish, or even sort of toxic or poisonous fish, right? But the healthy, nourishing fish that are floating down the river, you've got to kind of pick and choose. It's not about how you feel, it's about your values, right? In that context, at that moment, you are not, or your athlete is not the accumulation of that context and that feelings, right? It's just a situation that they're in. So it's okay, I know how I'm thinking, I know what my values are, I'm dealing with the distress of the moment, now I want to actually move forward. We call that committed action. What does that look like in practical terms?
Well, it involves setting goals and routines prior to being on the field, prior to the performance, and then we're acting in accordance with them. So what happens is those goals and routines end up being an emotional anchor to drive us. So we're moving, regardless of how we feel, in line with our values and persisting in alignment with these goals, even though there are obstacles in front of us or we're experiencing discomfort in the moment.
So how would you prepare for something like that? That sounds like maybe visualization would be a good tool for finding yourself in that moment, right? Because some of these mistakes are happening in contexts we've never experienced before. That's part of the challenge, right? Is we either don't know they're coming, or you just cannot adequately prepare for them because they are a unique context.
Right. I think this comes down to visualization skills, but also comes down to deliberate practice and creating situations in practice that are largely, extremely stressful, and learning how to adapt to that situation so that when it does happen, there's a level of automaticity here. I've been there before, I've experienced this, and I have the coping mechanisms in place to deal with whatever comes. That's true confidence.
Yeah.
It's not that you're never going to fail. It's that when you do fail, you have the coping mechanisms in place to step back up to where you were and get back in alignment with your values.
Yeah, good. And to your point earlier, there's a both and. That might be some framing stuff. That might be trying to keep a positive mindset when things are getting derailed, not in a fake, right, unrealistic kind of Pollyanna-ish way, but in a way that actually supports. So as always, we always hit this, it's about optionality, right? Having the different tools available to you. Again, when the newsletter comes out for this particular category, we'll have a lot of training videos, a lot of how-to, but I think Adam just gave you a really, really good breakdown of figure out what the adversity might be in advance, right? Replicate it to the best of your ability, prepare for it, visualize it, put yourself in it, make yourself aware of your thoughts in those moments, try to diffuse from those thoughts and understand it's not you as a whole, it's just the situation, and figure out what the committed action is that you're going to take. Ideally, as you said, Adam, right, beforehand, so that you can stay committed to it, you have that clear visualization, right? That will help us to adapt to different moments of transition going forward, whether it's the mistake that we make and we have to recover from, sustaining an injury, variety of other challenges. Adam, anything else you want to add on psych flexibility?
Yeah, what this allows us to do effectively is to be present, right? To be able to fully engage with the here and now and being aware of the current moment without distraction from the past, what you've done wrong in the past or what might happen in the future. So there's an element of mindfulness that helps us connect it to what's happening around them and also what's happening within them.
Yeah, it's a good, I think, connection back to some of the other things that we've covered, which is awareness, attention, our core motivations, some of the mindsets at play, right? These will all interact interestingly, I think, with psychological flexibility, which is why they're part of the 7 components, as we argue, right? So, okay, good. So hopefully that's helpful. Athletes, athletic directors, parents, coaches, whatever it might be. If you have questions about psychological flexibility, please reach out to us or check out the website. You can submit your contact info there. And we'll be coming out with a lot more resources on this topic to try to help you put it into action. Thanks for joining us.